Our next session is a presentation on the new hybrid workplace, the key learnings and best practices for business by Dinesh Mokhani, who's the CEO and founder of Smarten Spaces. Businesses are rethinking the workplace with a lot of emphasis on safety, flexibility, employee experience and reduced cost as they balance between back to work and work from home. This shift to the new hybrid workplace needs technology at the center of transformation. So join us as we share our learning in the last 4 months from helping Fortune 500 companies in over 120 locations, including New York, Chicago, London, Sydney, Helsinki, Moscow, Singapore, and Mumbai, to transition to the workplace of the future. Over to you, Dinesh.
All right, Torin, thank you very much. I shall get started and talk about the hybrid workplace. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And if you can, right, get set up. I just want to make sure that you can see my slides and you can also basically hear me at the same time, Torin.
Yep, I can hear you. That's great. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, let's get started. So I'm going to talk about the new hybrid workplace, right? Because every newspaper I open, every business leader I talk to, or every one of the existing customers we speak to are all talking about the hybrid workplace. I think the hybrid workplace is here to stay. Most definitely, whether it's the banking sector, the technology sector, whether you're looking at essential services, I think most people have been through over the past 6 to 9 months and have experienced what it is like to work from home. And I think that the world is trying to find a balance. And the balance is not something that they want to find for today, but it's a balance that they want to find for the longest time. Now, there are a lot of pros and cons to be able to do this, but most definitely, at least from what we see, and I know it's still early days, but companies, leaders are talking about why the need to move to the hybrid workplace. So today what I'm going to share with you is, obviously, we've been reading a lot. We've been having a lot of conversations. We've been, fairly busy over the past, I would say, 6 months or so in working with companies across 50 cities in about 16 countries, right? Doing multiple deployments to help them basically through this journey. And what's interesting is each one of them is not doing this just because it's COVID and just because they've got to take care of the next few months before people come back to work, but this is something that they want to do basically for the long term, right? And essentially we've had 5 key learnings from these deployments that we've done, and I wanted to make sure that I share these with you. If you have any questions, just put them in the box and I'll try to answer them to the best of my capability, right? So the first thing is, people started out thinking about safety, and they said, oh, we got to put in things into our offices so that we can effectively get people back to work. So they started putting in temperature sensors and contactless visitor management and things that actually were all around safety. Very quickly, it shifted to, businesses starting to think about rostering. And this was interesting because we thought it's going to be about safety, and we went and built everything we needed around safety. And very quickly it was, how do I know who's going to go to work? In some parts of the world, governments have announced that you can have 50% of your people working from home, 50% going to the office, and those percentages vary, right? And sometimes it's basically a total lockdown. So how do I determine who goes to work, which are the days that they actually go to work? And this led to the whole challenge around, how do I, in the long term, if I want to shift to hybrid, start thinking about work rostering? The second thing was effective space management, because now I have space and suddenly the spaces got disrupted. I've got to think about social distancing. So half my seats are gone. And even post-COVID, with the hybrid working, what's going to happen to the space? How's it going to get utilized? Should I give up some space? These are all the kind of questions that people have been asking, right? So the second learning we've had is that space management is actually becoming very, very vital. Businesses clearly want to save costs. Tomorrow morning, I'm talking to a large global bank, got the chief operating officer. First question, talk to me about cost. I've got all these offices around the world, and I'm spending a lot of money, do I really need them? Do I really need to figure out, well, what pieces of it I could actually give up? And these are real conversations, right? So cost is becoming top of mind for many businesses. Of course, safety, security, compliance, this is no stones unturned. In most of the systems we've put in, we've noticed the adoption have been very high, almost 100%. There was a time you put in technology and it hardly ever got used, but today it's being used and pretty much all of the time, right? But without technology, companies have seen the struggle. So one of the learnings we had was most companies said, no stones unturned. We can't have a single part of the process that we don't think about security, we don't think about compliance, we don't think about safety. And it was never a tick in the box. In the beginning, okay, it was, well, let's put temperature, and if we take that, I think that's enough. I think that world has completely changed. And then when you are putting your employees through a lot in terms of a hybrid workplace, what kind of experience are you going to give them? At least in what we have seen, the focus very quickly shifted from, okay, I've got my offices ready now, I've taken care of my social distancing and things like that, but it quickly shifted to what's the experience that I can give to the employee, because the employee is the one that's got to be kept most productive. So these are 5 areas that I'm going to focus on today in terms of learnings that we've had. One of the most important things was that it is not just about the workplace. It's really the coming together of things you need to do in the workplace, the things you need to think of on the workforce, and technology. When you bring the 3 together, that's when you create a hybrid workplace. That's where the future of work comes into play, right? And in most deployments we've done, we've noticed that it's usually a cross-functional team, the head of the workplace and design, the head of HR, and the head of technology, all 3 coming together and then defining what the hybrid workplace will look like, putting in basic rules that are going to be implemented and deployed, right? And I think it boiled down to 6 key things. The first was around culture and team dynamics. We have to still make sure that our employees are fully engaged, that they still remain connected to the organization. There are team dynamics that are at play. This is huge when you think about the future workplace. The second is around productivity. Will productivity go up? Will productivity go down in the hybrid workplace? It's been a mixed bag for companies around work from home. Some have said it's gone up. It's been awesome. Some have said it's gone down. I think people are looking at that leveler, right? Third is around flexibility. How much flexibility do you want to give? How much do you want it to be the choice of the employee versus choice of the organization? But that needs to be factored in. Employee experience I talked about has to be absolutely great, right? Because when you're putting them through a hybrid workplace, they need to know in a very easy and seamless manner, when do they go to work, where do they sit, and all kinds of things, right? Safety I talked about. And will a hybrid workplace be more expensive or will it be cheaper? The first question I get asked always is, okay, Dinesh, you seem to be very passionate. Tell me where the savings are. So I'm going to try and bucket this, but if you look at a hybrid workplace and that's where you are intending to go to, like most organizations, then you need to have these 6 things completely factored in. So let's first start with culture, team dynamics, and productivity. I think the first thing you need to solve is, if you can get the right person at the right place at the right time, there is, I think, a great opportunity for you to be able to get your culture and team dynamics and productivity right. Because people like to work in teams. First thing is that employees have been feeling a little isolated. So if I'm sitting at home, I've been working alone for basically the last 6 months. Now you're asking me to come back to work, so fair enough. I go back to work. I don't want that sense of isolation. When I go back, I want to go back at the same time that my team members have also come back. I want to go back at the same time that my department also has come back. And where I go and sit should be closer to my teammates, should be closer to the department. I should have some kind of affinity, right? And I have been collaborating with people over Zoom and basically other media. Is there a way that when I get back, I can collaborate with the people at the workplace, but people that I know? And I think we've all got to understand that this is an essential part of what we need to try and solve at the hybrid workplace, right? this has a big impact in sort of conversations we've had with our clients, in conversations we've had with people that are working in a hybrid manner, and even ourselves, right? So just keep in mind that this whole equation has to be solved. The second is, even if you're introducing flexible working hours or days, and when people, and let's say you're giving the flexibility of people to be able to choose their days, choose their seats, it's important that you think about the seats that they choose should be closer to their department, essentially to their teams. And the days that they choose, there should be recommendations in place that, okay, why don't you think about Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because you're part of these different teams and they are going to be there, right? And also from an HR perspective, there's an engagement strategy that has been planned because people are coming back to work. It's got to be planned in the manner that, it factors in who's coming back to work, when are they coming back to work, and which are the teams that are going to be coming back to work. But this is going to be important as you think about the hybrid workplace. I think technology has a huge role to play here because we've kind of looked at this, right? And we're working with a large bank here. They've got about 35,000 people. And for them to be able to do this without technology is a nightmare. And so obviously there is a great opportunity for leveraging AI-based technology to do this kind of proper workforce distribution. You put in what kind of percentages you want. I think that you've got to determine, right? How many will work from home? How many will be back to the office? There are things like leave that need to be factored in. There are things like change requests that need to be factored in. But if you let technology make this decision, and then obviously you've got the ability to make certain changes based on the recommendations, I think there's a high probability that you will get this right. And sometimes it is between the technology, between the AI system, as well as the team manager that work together to be able to make this decision. So far, what we've observed is that it's been fairly accurate, and it takes into consideration a lot of things like team dynamics, department affinity, how many seats are left at the workplace, just things like health declaration of employees, things like that. And eventually what we found was that when you leverage on technology to be able to do this, I think most employees came back saying that they had a productive day when they went back to work because, they knew where to sit, they knew which days they were going on, they planned their schedule out accordingly. And the second thing was they felt pretty good about it because they were able to work with the people that they were used to working with before COVID, right? So this is something which I think has been a huge learning. It's not straightforward, especially when you have multiple offices, you've got multiple floors, and you have multiple teams. But I think tech makes it very, very straightforward. If you input all the data in from the team structures to your offices, I think then technology helps you make that decision. Once you're done in terms of making sure that you understand which teams, how, and who, then comes the place around the workplace itself. Look at your seat plans, right? And it's interesting, when we started looking at these seat plans, we started to see that, well, you had these AutoCAD floor plans, and then people were taking tape and they would measure the distance between one seat to the other. And sometimes one seat would have 8 seats around it. So you had to do that 8 times to determine if this seat can be used or not. I think there's, again, an opportunity to look at, and by the way, that'll change. So 6 feet, and in some countries it's meters and things like that. And it's subject to error. And then as you change things around, you got to do the whole thing again, right? And this is where I think good technology comes into play. Look at your floor plans, let tech make that decision around determining which seats can and cannot be used so that you know how many seats are eventually going to be active. Now, to the previous point I made, you can't determine how many people can go back to work unless you've not been able to factor this in. And even in the future, as you look at a hybrid workplace, I think you have an opportunity now to be able to play around with the tools available to say, okay, guys, if I changed a few things around, if I gave up 3 floors or I added 3 floors, how much more capacity basically will that add? But being able to get this right so your organization is ready for flexibility, I think is basically huge, right? And then when it comes to employee experience, so, we also, like most companies, built a really nice desk booking app and things like that. But one of the learnings that I had was that many companies said, so, and this is basically divided, right? So some said, guys, I want the employee to choose. I want to give them the information. I want to tell them what's available. I want to be able, they should be choosing, which ones do I want to go to? Is it closer to my home? And I want to be with my teams. But other companies said, I don't want them to be able to do this, and I don't want to bother them with being able to do this. I want the system to be able to tell them that, look, this is the best thing for you, right? And basically, as you tell them what days, also tell them what neighborhoods they can pick and choose seats in. And that actually when they show up to work, they still have the ability to know where the neighborhood is and to know what seats are available, which ones have been cleaned, which ones, basically have not. So employee experience depends on the culture of the organization, can either come with a full flexible mode, which many of our clients are doing, but there are still others who are saying, we don't want to go down that path. We want the system to be able to do it. And I think the good news is, from your perspective, as you think of your organization, you have the ability to have those choices in place. Think about your rostering, think about the collaborative nature you want to build, and then determine what's that employee experience you want to give them as they think about hybrid workplace. One more learning we had, which is important, was, so we went ahead and thought about, like most people, thought about seats, but then some people said, what about lockers? If I have a seat, I also want a locker because I need to go and put my stuff in. And then what about the car park lot out there? And so we had to think about the car park lot out there as well. And then what about food? Because should we be catering for 50 people, 100 people? And so, when you book a space, you book the locker, you book the parking, but at the same time, you have the ability to pick your meal as well. But, as you think about the employee journey, these things start to become important. We, frankly, did not think about these things, but then as basically the hybrid workplace started to go live, these things became important, and then we had to obviously scramble, right? Also, basically, when you think about the hybrid workplace, right, you start thinking about monitoring and controlling occupancy, because you have to know whether or not you are exceeding occupancy because you only have so many seats. So how are you going to do that, right? You've got to have some way to be able to control that particular environment. And then obviously you need to start thinking of, so we had an instance where, we did this whole control occupancy for a building, and it was working really well until somebody went and kind of gave us information that, oh, by the way, yes, 30% of the people came to the building, but guess what? They all showed up instead of 9 floors and the usual assumption that they'll get distributed, they all showed up on 1 or 2 floors, and that caused major crowding, right? So the ability to not just think about the space, but also think about in terms of not having them congregate at one particular location is going to be very important as you start preparing to bring your employees back to work. Obviously, the whole contactless thing is important, but to be honest with you, in a hybrid workplace, contactless is not, basically in the future, won't be so much about safety, but it'll really be about making sure that, when a person has a seat available, when they have basically booked a locker, when they have a car park, when they come in, they don't have to keep on looking for these things. They don't have to keep on, figuring out a badge or a key or different things to be able to access these. It should be very seamless, and everything has to be done in a very contactless manner. So it's literally, you're in, you scan, you go. You've got to try to make it very, very simple. So don't think of contactless as just because of safety and no touch. This, I think, will become very important as you start to look at that hybrid space as well. Of course, smart cleaning is important, particularly in today's context, right? Because when people are coming in, they also want to know, has it been cleaned or not? And, when it's being used, your back office team is going to want to know if it has been used, not been used, when is it going to get used, so that you don't keep on cleaning the whole space. There's got to be a smarter way to be able to do this. And this applies to everything in your spaces, whether it's rooms, whether it's seats, whether it's, any kind of spaces that you actually may be using, right? And then I think we all have responsibility to maintain some form of contact tracing. A lot of people look at Bluetooth and things like that. Our belief is, I think, just having knowledge on who came in and what kind of spaces they used because they've booked those spaces, I think is good enough so that you're able to provide that information if you had a particular case, right? It is kind of non-intrusive basically as well. So think about how you're going to be putting these things in. Each one has some value today, but I actually think in the whole hybrid nature, it's going to have a lot of value moving forward, right? I mean, we talked about just smarter cafeterias, right? Today, it's, well, the same amount of food gets cooked irrespective of how many people are going to come. There's a smarter way to do it. There's a better way to do it, right? And I think in a hybrid workplace, this becomes critical because you will know how many people are coming in. So you'll be able to cater to that particular amount of meals as well. Rethink space allocation. I think one of the big things that's going to come out of a hybrid workplace is if you only have a certain percentage that's going to come in, then obviously you need to cater for that at the least. You don't need to have that much space. Our belief is that, and just seeing, of course, right now there's a lot of space and less people going in, but just seeing the early statistics coming in, right? We believe there's an opportunity as you don't have the one-on-one desk allocation anymore to be able to give back some space. So somebody the other day made this statement, and I just wanted to quote it. This is not from me, but the person basically said, right, that in the pre-pandemic times, 100% of space was used only 50% of the time. And I think that was true for most spaces, right? We all knew that spaces were not as utilized as they could have been. But I think in the hybrid workplace, 70% of the space has an opportunity to be used 100% of the time. And that's, I think, what we're all trying to achieve. Now, if you can make that happen, trust me, you can give a lot of money back to your organization because typically a seat, when you look at real estate space, when you look at all the facilities cost, you look at everything that goes into it, our average is it costs $25,000 annually. And basically, this is true for most major cities basically around the world, right? So if you're not going to move to a one-on-one desk allocation, I think there's a great opportunity to be able to give that space, right? And obviously, you have the opportunity to track all of this in time because if you're looking at rostering, if you're looking at desk management, space management, you need to think of what kind of sensors are you going to put in. Today, trust me, there are a lot of options available out there. And this was another learning we had, right? I think this feeling of, oh, I give you the software and I give you the sensor, I think is pretty restrictive. I think there's an opportunity for you to go out there and see there are a lot of choices from desk-based to the ones that go on the roof, to Wi-Fi based, to thermal based, to just simple QR codes, right? But I think today the opportunity pool has opened up, and I think the technology world has responded very effectively to be able to create these options, that are basically available. Also, from a tech point of view, I think holistically, right? The world of these point products and you thinking of piecing all of them together is actually a nightmare. If you're trying to get something done pretty quickly and you're trying to deliver a pretty phenomenal experience and you're looking at that one dashboard, I think you've got to look at it, basically from a single digital workplace, technology stack where you factor in all the things that are shown on the screen to your desk management and the ability for employees to do that on that single app and from a rostering perspective. And in the future, all of these will give you enough data to have a better demand and supply and then an expense and charge back, which, by the way, in a hybrid workplace scenario will change because you may, and some companies are thinking about it, be charging back departments based on utilization, which is an incentive for them to say, guys, don't block and hold spaces, use them as you need them. And so pay a little bit of attention on that. If you're able to do that successfully in expense and charge back, I think there's an opportunity to be able to manage it much more better, right? Eventually, I think today more than ever is an opportunity for you to look at that digital workplace that everybody had imagined, right? That time frame has been compressed. I think that before the pandemic, every conversation was about why do you need to do it and what are the benefits. I think today every conversation has shifted about how am I going to get it done, and how quickly am I actually going to get it done. I'm going to end off by making a statement. This is not a quote. This is basically from me, but basically the way that I look at it, basis of what we've seen across these 50 cities now in almost 16 countries, is that it's not about whether to move to a hybrid workplace or not, but when to move. And I think given the significant benefits around it, the world is taking this direction. And it's been interesting to every day talk to customers around the world and pretty much hear the same thing, to open any newspaper and look at it and pretty much hear the same thing, right? So I'm going to stop here. I just wanted to share my perspective with you. Very happy if you can reach out to us, obviously at Smarten or to me on LinkedIn. We'll be very happy to get connected. So Torrin, that's what I wanted to share. I'm going to hand back to you. Yeah.
That's terrific. Thank you very, very much, Dinesh. We've got a couple of questions from Johan Dimart. What kind of data have you been using in training your AI algorithms?
Okay, so that's great, right? So if I look at the AI algorithms, the first is you look at success rate. So you start tracking in terms of what your occupancy is. You start looking at how many people are actually booking and checking in. You start looking at, well, did teams, when they actually went to office, they started to sit together. Did they come back and say they were happy about it? Did they have a good day or not? So you've got to factor in the workplace, the people information with the sensor information and with the utilization on the app. When you kind of merge these three, that's the data that we're looking at to be able to determine the models on how rostering as well as space allocation will work.
That's great. And from Brandon DeWitt, we've had, are people comfortable having essentially no assignment and just working where they're assigned to each day, which might change, i.e. he says, disassociating ownership assignment from coming to campus?
Perfect. And that's why I talked about culture. And that's a great question, right? And that's why when you make a determination of flexibility, you have to factor that in. And so make sure that when they come back, they are at least with their teams, they're with their departments. That is more important to them than which seat they're sitting at, because it really doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, it's the people that you interact with, it's the neighborhood that you're used to. As far as you can get that right, I think the success rate is much, much higher. When we did not factor that in, I agree with you. There used to be a lot of issues and people say like, I still feel isolated. Why the hell am I coming to work, right?
Yeah, that's great. And John Tracino says, your tech allows employees to navigate and access a campus of buildings and or hub and spoke workplaces as part of their landscape of work opportunities? Question?
Sure, absolutely. So when they have the ability to see, they should see offices that are nearby, they should see co-working spaces that you may have signed up with, and they should be able to see the main buildings. Make a decision. When they get there, they just navigate through, because they don't know, if they're in a new space, they don't know where to go, right? And you may have assigned a space. That whole experience, you've got to keep it very easy. And it gets better over time, right? We've kind of got observations on how, if you look at the typical graph, how it is on week one and then how it starts to pick up, because people just get used to the new normal. And as far as I'll come back to that, they need to, they need to be able to see their colleagues and department. That's what makes them going.
That's great. Well, thank you very, very much. Your colleague has said to everybody, please feel free to stop by the Smarten Spaces booth if you like a personal demo of the platform, and they're available after work at your convenience. So thank you very, very much indeed.